Hey everyone, this is Dan. Let's talk about ASML. I bought ASML a little bit more than a year ago. Recently, I have made quite a bit of profit with ASML and like to share with you what I like about the company and what kind of risk I see for the stock for the near future. First of all, I'd like to say that my target for ASML is $640 by the end of July 2021. And the closing price as of last Friday was $625.67, and it is now March 28th, Sunday, 2021. Even though I own ASML shares, unlike some of the other people, I would not try to promote the stock relentlessly. I want to be realistic about it. At this point, I'm saying that the stock is probably a little bit overbought for the short term, and it might pull back a little bit in the next few days. But I'm still very bullish long term about ASML. Let me tell you why. First of all, what does ASML do? They develop, produce, market, sell, and service advanced semiconductor equipment systems. Particularly, they provide the extreme ultraviolet lithography systems and deep ultraviolet lithography systems. They are abbreviated to EUV or DUV systems. These systems are absolutely necessary for producing the most advanced microprocessors, and they are based in the Netherlands. Overall, ASML dominates the semiconductor lithography market with a 100% share in EUV and an 88% share in DUV equipment. They definitely have a very strong position in this market. There are a few pieces of news recently that are really beneficial to ASML. First of all, there's a global shortage in computer chips. That means people will need to build more factories to build more chips. And when they build more factories, they will have to buy from ASML because ASML has the monopoly on certain essential equipment for semiconductor foundries. Intel recently announced that they will invest about $20 billion to build 2 new fab plants in Arizona. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing plans to spend $12 billion to build a plant in Arizona. Samsung also announced that they plan to spend $17 billion to build a plant in the US by late 2023. Intel, Taiwan Semiconductor, and Samsung will all be buying equipment from ASML, and that'll be great business for ASML. Germany, France, and 11 other EU countries also announced their intent to invest heavily in fab plants so they can reduce their reliance on supplies from Asia. On the flip side, as of last year, US imposed sanctions on the Chinese chipmaker SMIC and prohibited ASML from exporting the most advanced EUV equipment to SMIC. Although recently, as of March 4, 2021, it was reported that SMIC of China was able to finalize a contract with ASML for $1.2 billion to obtain the DUV system, which is the older generation equipment. In the meanwhile, the most advanced EUV equipment is not included in that particular agreement. So there is still some part of the sanctions still in effect at this point, which will inhibit the growth of ASML's business in China. Let's look at the chart. This is daily chart. As of last Friday, it closed at $625.67. We can see this very bullish candlestick from last Friday, and it went way above the Bollinger Band. In fact, if you look back for the entire year, we don't see any other instance where the candlestick went that far above the Bollinger Band. That's why I think ASML is overbought for the short term, probably. And because of the strength of the company, it's not surprising that the price went up more than 150% during the past year. On the other hand, for RSI, we're at 64.7 or so. It's not as high as some of the other instances in the last year, but we're at a pretty high level. And that's why I think there's a high probability that the price might be pulling back a little bit in the next few days. Now, I would definitely hold on to my ASML shares for the long term for at least 6 months to a year, the bulk of it. But in the meanwhile, when I see a pullback, I might sell some of my shares and then try to buy them back in the next few days for swing trading to optimize my profit. At this point, I'd like to mention that I'm not a financial advisor. I share my trading strategies for educational purpose only. You should make your own decision with regard to buying or selling stocks, and you should probably consult with a financial advisor before you do so. Let's look at how ASML compares to the NASDAQ 100. The candlestick chart here is ASML. The purple line here is QQQ, the ETF that's pegged to the NASDAQ 100 index. And the blue line here is TQQQ, the ETF that's triple the volatility of QQQ. Starting 3 months ago, ASML was pretty much going up together with TQQQ. And then when the sell-off started for the tech sector, TQQQ went down much faster than ASML, and ASML was holding up fairly well, primarily because of the strength of the company. And then when the tech sector started to recover, ASML also recovered and reached an all-time high as of last Friday at 627.3. At this point, I'd like to remind you that if you like what you've seen so far, I very much appreciate if you can click the like, subscribe, and notification button so you can be notified when I post the next video. This is also for the sake of the YouTube algorithm. Thank you very much. Let's continue. This is the weekly chart. I just want to see to what extent the stock has been overbought. Now, if you look at the candlestick for the last week, we are almost touching the upper Bollinger Band, but not quite there yet. And if you look back the last 3 years, there were a few weeks when the candlestick actually went a little bit above the upper Bollinger Band. And from this perspective, ASML is not extremely overbought on a weekly basis. But on a daily chart, we saw that it was quite overbought. And meanwhile, the RSI indicator is at 71. It's pretty high, but it's not as high as the other 2 points here on the chart. If you look at the hourly period, we see this very bullish upward trending channel for the last 2-3 weeks. And then as of last Friday, of course, the price broke even above that, and that's extremely bullish. As far as the RSI indicator, it flashed a overbought signal here. And then, of course, we have the bullish buy signal from DMI and MACD. Basically, we see overbought warnings on a daily chart and hourly chart, and not so much on a weekly chart. But I still think there's a good chance that the price might pull back when the market opens tomorrow. Let's look at the support and resistance levels. Because we're at the all-time high for resistance levels, I have to resort to the Fibonacci sequence. If I use Fibonacci extension and use this point as a maximum point, the previous max, and this point as a previous min, then the Fibonacci extension of 23% will be at 628. And coincidentally, the price hit the peak of 627.3 last Friday and started to come down a little bit. And that means this 23% resistance level is really working. Now, if the price can get above that point, the next resistance level will be at 38% Fibonacci extension, which is 643. I'll be watching these two levels very carefully when I start doing swing trading with some of my shares. In the meanwhile, for support, I see a historical support, which was the previous max at 611, the next level at 594, and the next support level at 585. Let's look at some of the fundamental data. ASML has posted pretty impressive revenue growth in the last 2-3 years. We see a bit of seasonality here, with the third quarter being the best quarter for each of the 3 years, but overall they have pretty steady increase in revenues and earnings. And also they have a habit of announcing positive earnings surprises in the last few quarters, which is a good sign. Let's look at the other analysts' opinions. First of all, the closing prices of last Friday was 625.67. My own target is 640. I'll explain how I reached that target. In the meanwhile, Yahoo Business gives them a buy rating, 2 out of 5 points. The target is 578.2, a little bit less than the current price. Lewis Nevalier gives them a buy rating and overall B, which is a buy rating. TipRanks.com ranks them as outperform on a scale of 10 over 10, which is very bullish, with a high target of 640, which is the same as my target, average target price of 540 and low target of 443. CNN Money gives them a buy rating with a high target of 640, medium of 575, a low of 515. Overall, the current price is a little bit on the high side compared to the analyst targets. In the meanwhile, the street.com is very bullish on ASML. They give them a buy rating A- with a target price of 733.52. Let's look at my own calculations. First of all, I start with the data for 11 semiconductor companies. Then I added in the 3 semiconductor equipment companies, including ASML, Applied Materials, and Lam Research Corporation. I look at their trailing P/E ratios and forward P/E ratios. The ASML trailing P/E ratio of 61.8 and forward P/E ratio of 45 are a little bit on the high side compared to the other companies. Although based on the extremely strong competitive position of ASML, I think those numbers are justified. I used the earning growth estimate of 17.1% for the next 2-3 years, which is the number used by Yahoo Finance, and I used the average forward P/E ratio of 55, and then I used the actual earnings for 2020, applied these assumptions, and extrapolated into 2021, 22, and 23, and I arrived at my target price of $640 a share, which is not too much higher than the current price of $627. I want to be conservative for now because of the phenomenal increase in the ASML stock price recently. I think it's probably time for a little pullback before it collects enough momentum to go upward again. If you look at the ASML 2020 annual report, they talk about the revenues from each of the major segments. The EUV, which is their most advanced technology, brought in 4.63 billion euros, and compared to last year, it's almost doubled. The older technology, the DUV technology, still brought in more than 50% of their revenues as of 2020. But definitely the latest EUV segment is growing quickly. And by the way, the EUV technology is generally used for 7 nanometer chips or chips with smaller dimension than that, for example, 5 nanometers or 3 nanometer chips in the future. And the DUV technology has been used for 7 nanometer chips or chips with larger dimension. As you probably know, the smaller the dimension, the faster the processors are and the less energy they consume. And that's why for semiconductor companies to build the fastest processors, they will increasingly have to rely on the EUV equipment. This is also from the ASML annual report. They talk about its strength, which include the technology leadership, the market leadership, and their strong financial position. And they mention their weaknesses. They are concerned about how to scale up their workforce quickly because they've been growing quickly. They talk about the opportunities, for example, the mega trends of the industry, which is this explosion in demand for chips. They talk about some of their risks, for example, geopolitical tensions and supply chain disruption. My own analysis is that there are a few favorable factors that help ASML. For example, their monopoly position for the EUV equipment, the gaming, cryptocurrency mining, artificial intelligence, autonomous driving, all these different industry segments will continue to demand faster and faster processors. The pandemic has increased people's reliance on electronics, so we will see more and more demand for new processors and faster processors. And the world chip shortage is already driving increase in investments on semiconductor foundries, which will buy ASML equipment. And of course, ASML's major customers, including TSM, Samsung, and Intel, have already announced aggressive plans to increase their foundry capabilities. I see a couple of risks on the horizon. Number one, the stock might be overbought for the short term, and the US sanctions on Chinese semiconductor companies have not been completely lifted yet. To recap, my short-term target for ASML is $640 a share by the end of July 2021. I'm bullish long-term about ASML. If you're watching this video a few days after March 28, 2021, I'd like to remind you to check the update section below this video in case I have added update notes. In the meanwhile, I'd like to remind you to click the like, subscribe, and notification button if you like what you've seen so far. That way you'll be notified when I post the next video. It is also for the sake of YouTube algorithm. Thank you very much. And as usual, I will welcome your comments, questions, and suggestions. This about wraps up my video for now. I will chat with you again in the next few days. In the meanwhile, I'd like to wish you the very best of luck with your financial investments.